Thank you for joining us for the Eliminate the Use of an Advance Payment Request webinar. And so this is focused on expenses that do not have proof of payment at the time that you are submitting your payment request. I'm Whitney Schumacher. I'm the database administrator. And then we also have Jennifer Zarek on the webinar, and she is the Chief Data Officer. As we're going through the webinar, you can go ahead and use that chat feature. I believe there's a chat button on your screen, and then you can also use the Q&A button. And to get to that, you have to click, I think it says there's a dots on it. You click the Q&A. So you can use either one to ask questions during the webinar. And then we also kind of have breaks where we'll ask if there's any confusion, and then we'll have questions at the end as well. All right. So our agenda today is to kind of go over the summary of the changes from what we had done before to what we're going to do now when you don't have proof of payment for your expense. And then we're going to go ahead and do a demo of that so you can see the entire process as we're going through. And then we'll go over if you had done an advance in the past, how we're going to kind of rectify those, and moving forward, how we're going to have better communication on getting proof of payment entered for your award. All right, so the summary of the changes when you have expenses without proof of payment. So before, when you didn't have the proof of payment for your expenses, we didn't have you enter the expenses at the time of your payment request, and we had you enter them after. So now what we're going to do is we're going to have you enter those expenses when you are doing your payment request, and you're going to have them closed with your payment request, and we're essentially marking whether they do or do not have proof of payment for all your expenses, which will be a required field, so it'll be pretty obvious if you're not doing it right. The second main difference is all payment requests are going to be reimbursement. So before, we had you guys do advances, and now they're going to be 100% reimbursement. You won't need to use the advance type ever. And then now, when you do not have proof of payment at the time of payment request, you'll get paid, and then you'll be able to receive that proof of payment, whatever you were waiting for. And once you do have that, you're going to enter, create and enter information in a custom form, which you should somewhat be familiar with, and the form's called Payment Request Source Documentation Tracker. So you won't fill that out until you do have proof of payment, the documentation. But as we all know, you will always attach source documentation for all expenses. But on this, we're just focusing when you don't have proof of payment, because you'll need both. All right, so in our current process, I've highlighted the 3 main changes. You'll see most of it's the same. When we create expenses on the custom tab, there is now a section that's going to have a yes, no proof of payment question. It's required for all expenses, so you can't not do it. You'll go ahead, review your expenses like normal, create your reporting period, and close it. So all the expenses are closed. And then you'll create your payment request. And the change there is it's going to be a reimbursement payment request. And all of your expenses will be in there. And then you'll get paid like normal. And when that approved payment request, when you do have all of the proof of payment documents that you are missing, then you will fill out the payment request source documentation tracker form. And if you did have proof of payment for all of your expenses in that payment request, then you would not need to fill it out. All right, so this is that first box of create expenses. So there is an expense payment details section now on the custom tab. It's just a yes, no question. So if you do not have proof of payment, you're going to select no, which means in the future, you'll have to fill out that form and provide that proof of payment. But we know you will always have your source documentation regardless on the attachments tab. Let's see here. And then below down here is just wording of kind of just what I said. You always have source documentation on the attachments tab. But if you do have proof of payment, of course, you do want to attach it. You'd say, yes, you do. And then it's just a reminder that if you do not have it, you're going to have to fill out that form. And I do have a definition of proof of payment, and it now is in this, the definition now is in this custom tab. It's also in that custom form that you'll fill out. And it is proof of payment means a canceled check, bank statement, confirmation of debit or credit card payment, confirmation of wire or automated clearinghouse transfer, or similar documentation which provides substantiating evidence that payment of an invoice has been made. Main examples when you're going to select no is if your proof of payment is your bank statement and you don't have access to your bank statement yet. If you haven't paid a vendor yet, then you're going to put no. And if the other main example is if you haven't paid your line of credit. Right. So after you create your expense, you're going to close it with a reporting period like normal. So the expense is non-editable. And then you're going to go ahead and create your payment request. When you create your payment request, it's pretty simple now, because what you're going to do, you're going to name it as you usually name it. You'll do your date created. You will always attach at least one reporting period, if not more, because we know our expenses are now in that reporting period. Your payment type will always be reimbursement. And when you are selecting those reporting periods, as we know, the costs and contributions will auto sum. So you won't have to mess with the costs or contributions at all, because they're a part of your expenses. If these are wrong now, you know your expense is incorrectly entered. And so you'll have to notify us so we can reopen that reporting period, because you won't use the adjusted amounts now. So before, if you click the edit pencil, you get your like adjusted match or adjusted acquisition of real property. You will never use those. If this is incorrect, that means your expenses are incorrect and you should not continue to go forward, because we're using your reporting periods that auto pull the expenses. And now, once you get your net total will always equal your requested amount. So if you are expecting more or less money than what the net total says, that means your expenses were probably incorrectly entered. So this will always be the same. So once again, you won't have to click the edit pencil ever on either one. Do we have any questions so far? So essentially, your payment request is just like a normal reimbursement payment request that you had been doing before. All right. So after your payment request has been approved, paid, and you have essentially now you have access, or now you have your proof of payment for those expenses in that payment request. Now we are going to fill out a custom form to essentially attach the we're going to put in some, make sure you didn't hold on to the funds too long. How essentially we're going to tie the proof of payment to the expenses. So you'll go to your award like normal, go to that custom tab. You'll go to the payment request folder and choose payment request source documentation tracker. You'll go ahead and click the plus icon in the top right to create a new one. A good reminder is there are icons that look like this on the form if you need more information than what's on the form. And you're going to fill out one per payment request. So for example, if I have 4 expenses and 3 of them I did not have proof of payment, I'm still only going to fill out this form once per payment request. I am not going to fill it out 3 different times, just once. So after you fill it out, DED will look at it. If they give you any edits, you need to edit the existing form. Do not create a new one, just edit this one that you had created originally, and that you'll just change the final submission date. And I will show you that once we get into that. Something that's not in the slide that maybe I should have added is a lot of your proof of payments right now, like your bank statements, you're putting in that documents folder. And now essentially what you're going to do is you will enter your bank statements in this custom tab. So when you're connecting the dots of what am I changing, what's my new process, instead of using that documents folder to put your bank statements, you're essentially going to put it in this custom form. All right, so what's the advantages of us changing to this new process? Well, because all the expenses are in when you're asking for your payment, it's easier for both us and you to see the balance of your award. Another reason why is now, before you couldn't do an advance and a reimbursement with one payment request, and essentially now you can. So you could do add expenses where you paid and have not paid the vendor, for example. And a big reason why is so now you only have to learn one process of how to do payment requests instead of 2. And you won't have to so much look to see what kind of payment requests you did last time. So I think it'll just be easier to learn one process going forward. Before we go into the demo, do we have any questions? Jennifer, can you think of any questions we had last time that I didn't cover this time?
I think you covered all of the questions that we had up to this point from the last session.
Yeah. All right, we're going to start our demo, but if you have any questions as we're doing the demo, go ahead and put them in chat as well. So in this demo example, we're going to have 3 expenses. 2 of them, we are not going to have proof of payment at the time of our payment request, and one of them we will. So we're going to ask for that $29,500, and then I will show you how to do that source documentation tracker for the two expenses that don't have proof of payment. So that's going to be $27,000 worth. So if you want to keep this slide up while we're doing the example, I would ask you to open the link in the chat that Jennifer put for the slide deck. I'm on slide 9. I will start the demo. All right. Oh, and I'm going to zoom in because I remember that. All right, so I'm on my test award, and I'm going to go ahead and go to my expenses area. So I'm going to go to post award, financial expenses. And then if I click run, I'd see the expenses I had before. I don't have any in this award, so I'm going to go ahead, click the plus icon. I'm going to start filling out the general tab. So for my first invoice, I have street improvement for 2,000. And let's say this happened in March. And I still need to make my expense status as reviewed. My payee is optional, as we know, and for the description, I'm going to write in the invoice number. That's going to be in my attachments area. And if I had any other description, I could go ahead and put it there. In my financials tab, I'm not going to fill out anything because this does not have match. For my attachments, I'm going to go ahead and choose my files. For this example, I'm only going to have source documentation. I'm not going to have proof of payment. So I only have that. And I'm going to go ahead and fill out the custom tab. So do you have proof of payment for this expense? I'm going to select no. In the attachments area, I only had source documentation. So again, always do source documentation for your expense. Then this is what we went over before. If you do have it, attach it. If not, you're going to have to fill out the form later. And then here's our proof of payment definition. And I'm just going to quickly fill out this, which is unrelated to today's webinar, but you do have to fill out the program income and RLF information. So there's my first one, and I'm going to go ahead and do my second one. And this one's general admin. 7,000. And again, we're going to say this happened in March. I'm going to remember to mark it as reviewed and enter what it is. In the financials tab, I'm not going to fill out anything because it's all going to be grant funded. In my attachments, I do have proof of payment, so I'm going to attach both. For you, this might just be one attachment, but for this example, I have split them out into two. And then I'm going to fill out the custom form. Do you have proof of payment for this expense? Yes. I'm going to fill out this. I have one more. Street improvements for $25,000. Expense status reviewed. This one I do have cash match. So I'm going to go ahead and click the dollar icon. It's easier. $4,500. When I click out of it, this auto generates, so I know that I'm asking for the 20,500 for this expense. Go to attachments. Let's see here, I only have source documentation, which means in the custom tab, do you have proof of payment for this expense? No, I do not. All right, I have my 3 expenses entered, so I'm going to go ahead and close them in a reporting period so I can make a payment request. So I'm going to go to the Post Award tab, Management Reporting Periods. I have one open, but I'm going to create one and just do March. So I'm going to click the plus icon in the top right, expenses. I need to make sure I choose correct year, March 2022. Here is the $34,000 of the expenses I've entered, so that matches. Looks like I have everything. So I'm going to go ahead and close this. So after you've closed the reporting period, the fastest way to get to that reporting period grid is to click on this reporting periods button. It doesn't look like a button until you hover over it, but that will take us back to the grid. I have my March reporting period, so I'm going to go ahead and click on the money icon to go to the payment, to create a payment request. All right, so now I'm ready. So I'm going to payment request name, date created, going to be today's date. Because I went through the reporting period and clicked that dollar icon, it already selected March for me. So it pulled in this information. Remember, if you go through the payment request grid and click plus, you're going to left click inside here and click and then select the reporting period. Or if you have 2, I would go ahead and select left click in here and select the other reporting period. Payment type, it's always going to be reimbursement. And then here are my costs and my match, and it auto populates for me. I don't have to, you shouldn't have to click anything over here. It should auto populate and be correct because it's pulling in those expenses. So my net total is $29,500. That's what we were expecting. So that's what I'm going to enter as the requested amount. So my net total will always equal my requested amount. And if you want to make comments to yourself, I'll need to enter the payment documentation tracker, you can, or whatever comments you have. But also remember to select your request for funds attachment that is signed. And at this point, we're ready to submit our payment request. Does anyone have questions for this part of creating, either creating expenses or creating the payment request?
One item that I just want to reinforce that Whitney said is all of your source documentation goes on the expenses. The only thing that should be attached to the payment request itself is the signed request for funds form. I think we've had some confusion about that. So just to repeat, all the source documentation and proof of payment, if you have it, at the time of the request should be submitted on the expenses. Only the signed request for funds form goes on the payment request itself. If you have a question and you'd rather ask it out loud, you can put your name in the chat and we will unmute you. Otherwise, you can continue to use the chat or the QA for any questions.
All right, so I went back to the payment request grid, and you can see my submitted one. I am getting it approved real fast on my end. But you can also see I had a previously rejected payment request as well. There we go. So let's say my payment request, it's very unlikely you'd be able to do this in the same day, but so let's say my payment request is approved and I now have access, or I have my proof of payment for those expenses I didn't have before. So now I'm going to go ahead and fill out that proof of payment tracker. So to do that, so this would be after your approved payment request has gone through, we've received the money. So it'd actually be impossible to do the same day. We paid it, and now we have the proof of payment available to us. We're going to go to this custom tab. We're going to go to the payment request folder. We're going to go ahead and go to the tracker. Oops, didn't get it. There we go. Wasn't sure if we had selected it or not. All right, so once we go there, we have the grid, and you can see any previously entered forms. If you need to edit one you've already created, this is where you'd go to do that, and you'd click the edit pencil. But we're going to go ahead and create one. So I'm going to click the plus icon in the top right. And at the top, there's going to be the instructions for the form. Complete this after you receive your grant funds for which you did not have proof of payment. You need to demonstrate a line of credit. Remember not to hold it for more than 5 days. You only need to, this only needs to reflect the expenses that do not have proof of payment. So for example, we have, out of our 3 expenses, one of them we do have proof of payment when we did our payment request, invoice ABC, if you're looking on the slide. So we don't need to put anything about invoice ABC on this form. And then it's going to remind you if you do have edits, you're going to edit this specific form, not create a new one. So payment request name, if you hover over it, it's going to say, please enter the exact payment request name. So I'm just going to go back to see what I had named it, and I just named it payment request number 1. It just helps in case you get off on your payment request numbering, or since sometimes you have to do different versions, which ones you're telling us it's associated with. Go ahead and enter my payment request number. Date you received payment from the state. So let's say, for example, I received it on the 12th. Date last payment cleared your account. Let's say I did that on the 15th. Again, hover over the eyes for more information on how to fill out the field. Total amount paid to all vendors. Remember, this is only going to be the expenses that were marked no. So we had $27,000 worth of that. So I'm going to go ahead and enter it here. And this is the direct cost, not the grant funds. It's just the direct cost on the expense. So that's why it's $27,000, even though the invoice 5952 had cash match. And then here's where you're going to upload your proof of payment. And the definition is below. Notice it's only one file, so you might need to combine files in order to get it to one upload. So I'm going to go ahead and
another thing to add on the upload, just a reminder, Whitney said this when she was in the slides, but this is also where you upload your bank statements showing the state payment coming into your account as well. So instead of putting that in the documents folder like you've done previously, you'll use this form.
Is the payment request complete? Yes, and then you'd mark the date. So let's say I did that on the 25th. I'm going to go ahead and click create. So it's going to load the grid again. So it's nice that the grid actually shows you what you filled out in it. If you wanted to go directly to what you had uploaded, you could actually click this and it's going to take you to the upload. If you needed to edit this form, we're going to go ahead and click the edit pencil on it. We're not going to create a new one. For example, let's say the DED staff member said the date that it cleared your account, you marked it incorrectly. Be like, oh, okay, so I'll go in and edit it, or maybe you need to upload a different attachment. So you delete it and then re-upload it. And then you would update your date of submission to whatever date that ended up being. Go ahead and click save. And at this point, this is the end of our demo. If you have any questions, you can go ahead, ask them now. Be a good time. And if not, we can go back to our slides. All right. So what if in the past you had submitted advances like our old process? What should you do now? So what DED is going to do is we're going to create the expenses from your previous advances that have not been entered yet. And so we will do that for you. So for example, if you had an advance that you hadn't gotten to recreating those expenses to put that proof of payment on, which we had done before, DED will go back and audit and essentially create and close those for you. And we're going to do those. We're going to do that April and May. And if we have to, we might get into June, but we're going to try to get and complete them into May. And essentially what we're going to do is we're going to get your award caught up with your expenses so it's up to date. When that happens and we say we created these expenses for you, you need to still provide us proof of payment for like payment request 567. You will go in and complete the source documentation tracker form for those payment requests. So we'll let you know which ones we need proof of payment on, but you'll still need to complete those in your award, but you will use the new proof of payment tracker custom form. And we will go ahead and notify the recipient grant manager on which ones those are.
This notification will happen probably in May. It could go into June as we're working through this process, award by award.
If you have a payment request from today on, go ahead and use the new process. So if you don't have proof of payment because you hadn't paid a vendor, go ahead, enter those expenses like we've shown you today, and start that new process. Don't do the old process, just start the new process. All right, so in the future with our new process, what's our communication going to be like? So DED will notify the recipient grant managers if they have outstanding source documentation tracker custom forms. So let's say this will most likely be at least quarterly, if not sooner. We'll notify you, the grant manager, if you had a couple payment requests that we still don't have that source documentation tracker form for. So expect that at least quarterly, if not more. And when program reps get your newly submitted payment requests in, they have a report that they can check to look for any forms that should be there that aren't. So they might let you know, hey, you still haven't filled it out for your last payment request type of deal. And it's kind of just a reminder that you still need to get that information entered. A good place for resources, as we know, is our Amplify page on our website. We've gotten a new website fairly recently, so any links are broken, I'd go ahead and just go directly to the website and try to find it. That's also, this link is where this recording is going to be stored, as well as a copy of the slides. And as a good reminder is when you're in Amplify is to use a supported browser like Chrome, Firefox, or Edge. At this time, do we have any other questions? If you do have questions about this specifically, you can email our support box, and that is, Jennifer, do you want to put the email? Yep, there it is. If you have specific questions on how I do this process that we're showing you, go ahead and email that address, ded.support@nebraska.gov. If you have questions on either this process or questions regarding your previous advances, we can get that sorted out. All right, if we don't have any other questions, thank you for coming, and have a good rest of your day.